Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the El Cajon City Council meeting. We continue to hold meetings, remote meetings, while the governor's executive order continues to be in effect due to COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to remind our citizens that they can submit questions for items on today's agenda, as we have done in previous meetings. I encourage that public comments be submitted at this time. They will be read at the appropriate time during this meeting. Comments will be accepted up to the conclusion of the vote of the item. Comments may be submitted through the City of El Cajon's website at cityofElCajon.us under Agendas and Minutes. Go to the video streaming and you will see a button to submit your comments. The meeting is called to order. I'd like to ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, if you can please state that you are present when I call on your name. Mayor Wells.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz.
I'm here.
Council Member Goebel.
Here.
Council Member Kendrick.
Here.
And Council Member McClellan.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, would you all then please say the Pledge of Allegiance with me and then wait for a moment of silence after that. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. The city clerk posted orders of adjournment of the September 22nd, 2020 meeting and the agenda of the October 13th, 2020 meeting in accordance with state law, council, and housing authority policy. We have two presentations today on today's agenda. The first is a presentation regarding 92020 Day, and our Director of Recreation, Frank Carson, will tell us about this. Frank?
Thank you, Mayor. Just trying to get my computer set here. There we go. At the request of council, we wanted to do a brief presentation on our 92020 Day. It matches our zip code, September 20th, 2020. We had very good support from the community considering we are still in the COVID-19 environment. So just to give you a little bit of a brief rundown, it was on September 20th, 2020, hence the 92020 Day. We had a little over 80 volunteers in total. 3 truckloads of trash were collected. We had 37 items of graffiti removed or more or less painted over, covered up. And we hung 449 signs. I wanted to make sure I got that, just under 450. So a lot of signs were hung, and I know people actually on this meeting right now were also responsible for that. Also, in addition to that, we had volunteers from Grand Hills High do 1 truckload of mulch right out in front of here at City Hall. 5 canvases were painted, and these are paint by number canvases. I'll show you an image of that in just a little bit. But we try to get every volunteer and everybody involved in the day in painting those. We had this mural, and this is about 85% complete right now. It's going to take her, she said, about 4 more visits to get the more finer details. But she is in the process of coming back on a weekly basis just to get the more finer details. This is a celebrated entryway at Wells Park, and part of crime prevention through environmental design, you want a celebrated entryway. You want it to be welcoming. So that's why we chose the word welcome, bienvenidos, and then also the word welcome in Arabic. So people of our 3 primary languages here in El Cajon felt welcome there. We had 1 mobile DJ, and I'll show you some highlights of that mobile DJ. And then we also did about 3 art items for the dog park, and I'll show you a couple images for that. So what you see here are all of our different volunteers helping out with the paint by numbers canvases that we will eventually hang here in City Hall as 92020 Day. And it basically was highlights of different things throughout the city within the numbers. And we also have postcards that we gave out to the volunteers that had 92020 on it also to celebrate the day. The volunteers got T-shirts, swag bag that had hand sanitizer and some lip balm with 92020 on it as well. We had a small group, so 3 people, paint these, and we're going to hang these in the dog park once we get a nice cover over them just to protect them from the sun. But these are some artwork that we had done for the dog park. And then the 449 signs we hung, some were these actual walking routes that we have that are basically loops around, 1.6, 2.0. We even have a pretty heavy duty one that's almost 5 miles that goes from Main Street all the way to the top of Main Street at Fletcher Hills and then back. And we have some of these more fun ones. So it's a 10-minute walk to a pool from this location. It's a 10-minute walk to Fresh Cut Flowers. We even have, it's a 10-minute walk to tacos. It's a 10-minute walk to kebabs, just to get people recognizing that they can walk 10 minutes to these different locations from exactly where they're at to keep commerce moving and do a little foot traffic with it too. So bear with me. I'm going to try to play 3 of these quick videos that we did on our Instagram story with our mobile DJ. Oh, here, I might have to do it within this system here. So let's try this. So the mobile DJ we had very small groups, anywhere from what you saw 2 to 10 total. We have Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Ortiz here featured, doing a little dance. Hey. And then we have Councilmember Goebel right here. So highlighting the signs that they were hanging. But it was more or less trying to make it a fun event. We wanted to experiment with the mobile DJ just in case we wanted to incorporate that in future events, given that we can't have large gatherings right now. We would bring the mobile DJ to blocks or to neighborhoods and do something like that. So this was more or less our experiment with that also. It added a fun twist to it. And then especially we want to thank our sponsor. We were prepared to take up to 200 volunteers. We had a little over 80, and given the climate, I was happy with the 80 that we did have. So the leftover materials, we are rebranding it, working with Waste Management, our sponsor, to give out buckets. So these are Love Your Neighborhood buckets or Love Your Community buckets. And it will have trash pickers and different items for them to also clean up their own community within where they're at. This is a similar concept to I Love a Clean San Diego, where they put people on the beaches to pick up cigarette butts and similar things. We want to activate different neighborhoods to also do something like this, given our extra supplies that we do have. And that completes my presentation.
All right. Thank you very much. Next, we have a proclamation for National Planning Month. I'll read the proclamation, then I'll invite Chairman Paul Circo to share a few words with us. The month of October is designated as National Community Planning Month throughout the United States, which is as an opportunity to highlight the contributions of sound planning and plan implementation designed to improve the quality of our communities and environment. And whereas the celebration of National Community Planning Month gives us the opportunity to publicly recognize the participation and dedication of the El Cajon Planning Commissioners, staff planners, and administrative staff who have contributed their time and expertise to the improvement of the city of El Cajon. And now, therefore, I, Bill Wells, Mayor of the City of El Cajon, together with the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2020 to be Community Planning Month in the City of El Cajon, in conjunction with the celebration of National Community Planning Month. Join us in applauding the many valuable contributions made by the City of El Cajon Planning Commission staff and partners. And Paul, are you here? Mr. Circo.
Yes, I am.
Hi, I'll give it to you.
Thank you. And I appreciate the recognition. We appreciate partnering with the City of El Cajon and all the things that we get to work with you guys on improving our city and keeping El Cajon a place where people can work, play, and live.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks to the whole Planning Commission and staff from the City Council. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Tony's on there too.
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, moving to agenda changes. Staff, do you have any agenda changes?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we have no changes to the agenda.
Council members? Any agenda changes?
No.
All right. That then brings us to consent items. Consent items are routine matters enacted by one motion according to the recommendation listed below. With the concurrence of the City Council, a council member or person in attendance may request discussion of a consent item at this time. Council members, do you wish to pull any consent items?
No.
Staff? Angela,
No,
do we
sir.
have any comments for consent items?
We have no comments, sir.
I'll make a motion then to approve the consent items.
Second.
Mayor Wells, your vote, please.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel,
Yeah.
Councilmember Kendrick,
Yes.
and Councilmember McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Thanks, Angela. That brings us to public comment. At this time, any person may address a matter within the jurisdiction of the City Council, Housing Authority, successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency that is not on the agenda. Comments relating to items on today's agenda are to be taken at the time the item is heard. State law prohibits action or discussion on items not on the agenda. However, City Council and Housing Authority members may briefly respond to statements or questions, and an item may be placed on a future agenda. Angela, do you have anybody that's put in a public comment?
Yes, sir. I have 6 comments that we received. The first one is from Stephanie Harper, and it reads, transparency is something that is a must in any form of government. For the people you represent, this is very important because they depend on it. They depend on knowing you are honest with our tax dollars, what it's being used for, and to make sure it goes there. Too many politicians not being honest have caused too many people to give up on our government so they don't vote. This is so very wrong to do to our citizens that depend on you to make sure they have a future in the city they live in. Measure S was passed so each citizen in every district would be fairly represented by someone who lives in their district. That's what the measure was supposed to do. If there is a question regarding the truth of residence, it should be investigated, because if that person was to be elected and only to find out later that person gave false information, it will cost the city money to do another election or to appoint someone else in. So how fair is it to everyone who was honest that ran in that race? Question mark. There are lots of money over a lie? Question mark. But what is even worse than that is the voters who were lied to, who will feel betrayed once again by their government. So I suggest that there be a clause or amendment put into our city's charter like it should have been from the time Measure S was passed. This is our vote that is being compromised, and lying about anything at any time is wrong. I really want council to think about this so we could all use more honesty. And then the next 5 comments were submitted anonymously. The first one reads, I feel that if you do not live in District 2, you should not run for District 2. It would be very unfair if you did. We need someone who is honest and trustworthy, someone who will fight for us. Next comment. If you don't live in the district, then why would you run in that district? Question mark. Just more lies. Why doesn't he explain how he can live with his mom, but wife lives somewhere else? Question mark. No more liars in our government. Make this guy prove he is living in district. This is the reason people don't vote. Equal representation, no more lies. Next comment. The next one is actually from Amanda Mergens. My town needs actual representation. By that I mean council members should actually live in the districts they are running for. I'm getting lies all day from my government and I'm sick of it. Next comment, again anonymously submitted. I believe that it is unfair to let someone run for council in a district they don't live in, and acting like they do live in that district is deceitful to the voters. And the last comment is again anonymous. Is this true? Question mark. Is there someone running for a district that doesn't live in that district? Question mark. This is messed up. How can we trust government when you allow things like this to happen? I don't think someone that lives in another district should be able to do that. Ms. Stephanie Harper should be in that seat. Why? I'm homeless and have been for quite some time. I've had multiple run-ins with El Cajon police and recently been ticketed, which makes between my lady and I, we have 23 of them in the past 2.5 years. Both of us have received tickets for my puppy being off a leash when other people that are not homeless walking their dogs without a leash. So what gives? I'm a homeless man that works every day and trying to take care of my little family but seem to be getting nowhere due to garnishments from child support and California Franchise Tax Board. So what my point of this is, I feel Ms. Harper is my voice because I've gotten nowhere talking with the ECPD. We need a voice, and I and many others feel she is the best candidate for council and for District 2. End of comment, and we have no more comments, sir.
Thanks very much. There are no written communications on today's agenda. There are no public hearings on today's agenda. We have 2 administrative reports on today's agenda. Item 12 is the first quarter report for fiscal year 20 through 21, and I'll ask staff to introduce this item, please.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, our finance director, Cajon, is coming online right now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, distinguished members of the City Council. My name is Cajon. I'm the Director of Finance for the City of El Cajon, and today we're here to present the fiscal year 2021 first quarter report. This report, Frank, can we go ahead and share screens, please?
You should be able to have that access.
And there we are. This report's a little more robust than it typically is. We have a lot more material than we typically do in an average fiscal year. In today's presentation, we'll be discussing a brief overview and our economic environment, briefly touch on sales tax, discuss our FY20 results, briefly go over the outlook for fiscal year 21, discuss a little housekeeping with our FY21 first quarter budget adjustments, and then discuss CalPERS and our pension liability. Starting with the economic outlook, we don't have a whole lot of new news to share from when we were in front of you last. The gross domestic product estimate for quarter 2 of 2020 has been revised a couple of times. However, they're currently holding at 31.4% down, and this is pretty consistent with what we've previously discussed. Third quarter estimate is due out at the end of this month, and I think there's a lot of people that are anxiously waiting to see what that looks like. I think the optimists are expecting a bounce back to some extent. The unemployment rate has improved dramatically. When we were in front of you in May, we were looking at unemployment rates in the neighborhood of 15%. As of September, the national unemployment rate has improved to 7.9%. The state unemployment rate in August was 11.6, and the San Diego region was 9.9 for the same period. These are not great numbers, but they are better than they were. On the inflation front, we were looking at a 12-month CPI increase of 0.3% back in April. That has improved, or gone up anyways. In August of this year, a 12-month increase of 1.3%, and it appears that that's beginning to get back to more normal levels. Additionally, the Federal Open Market Committee is expected to meet again at the beginning of November. They currently have the federal funds rates at 0 to 1/4% and have intimated that they expect to leave that there for quite some time. Housing and construction permits are down approximately 0.1% from last year, and home starts are up 2.8% from last year. Moving on to sales tax. This is an area that we have watched very, very closely, and we'll bounce around a little bit with themes. This chart contains both regular sales tax as well as our Prop J sales tax. In a column there titled simply pre-COVID projections, this is what we were looking at and anticipating for the next 5 years, 6 years at the start of the calendar year. Currently, those projections have been revised down pretty significantly, and you're looking at, for the complete years there, 21 through 25, we're looking at a drop in sales tax of between $4 and $4.5 million a year. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but this is quite a bit better than we were looking at a couple of months ago. The same information presented graphically looks like this. The green line on this chart represents the combination of historical sales tax returns as well as plotting out the current projection. The rather large dip to the left of this graph is the Great Recession. To the right, you can see a little bit of a depression, which represents the anticipated event we're currently experiencing. You can see just at this level that the anticipation as this event is not expected to be nearly as deep or last nearly as long as the Great Recession. The dotted red line represents how much time it took for us to return to the pre-event levels. In the case of the Great Recession, this took somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 years before we just got back to where we were at the start of this event. Currently, we're anticipating this to be more in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 years to get back to where we are. In this graph, please also take note of the blue line, which represents that pre-COVID anticipation of what we were expecting, the pre-COVID projection of sales tax. And as we have presented in the past, the difference between those two lines, the blue line and the green line below it, represents the drop in sales tax as a result of this event. One of the things I want to catch us up on a little bit here is how we've gone from our last discussion to where we are today, the progression of projections. This event started to come to our attention, or the effects were beginning to be felt right about the same time we were finishing our mid-year report and 5-year business plan for FY20. We delayed the release of that report while we were waiting for better information to come in. And this is a theme you will hear me repeat on several times in this presentation. We held off as long as we could, and we eventually got to a point that we realized we were not going to have good information in time for that report, and we were only able to provide hypothetical scenarios in April. However, in May, we came back with a revised 5-year outlook, and it represented at that time a drop in sales tax of almost $7 million a year. Since then, we've gone through June, we've received a couple of updates to our sales tax projections, and things are starting to look better than we originally anticipated. One big reason for that is the governor allowed the deferral of both sales tax payments as well as reporting. And it's the reporting itself that really has caused us a lot of trouble, because we could see that we were not receiving the money that we were anticipating, but we didn't know if it was just the drop off in activity, economic activity, or if it was just the deferral of payment. Since then, the deadline for reporting has come and gone, and therefore we have a better sense now of what was deferred and what we were missing. And that largely supports why this projection has changed for the good as much as it has. However, I would still caution it is early still. This event in terms of financial activity is still fairly young and evolving. Also for the fiscal year, while it's easy to say we're already October, 4 months in, really we've only started receiving FY21 revenue in September for the most part. So we take a cautious look at this. It is encouraging information, but we are looking at it very cautiously. One other thing I want to mention is this event really is a resetting of the table. That drop in the blue line to the green line looking forward really is a signal for us to seek a new normal. The reality is this isn't an event that we struggle through for a year or two, and then we just bounce right back to where we were like nothing had ever happened. We really are starting at the ground floor again, starting from a new spot, and we do need to adjust the way we run our business. Curiously, if you've ever looked at any kind of graphing of the cliche business cycle, or anything associated with it, you'll see a very predictable pattern. If you stand back and look at it from a distance, you can see a pattern that continues to increase over a long period of time. However, when you get in and look closely at it, you see it grow, drop, and this uncertainty is the result of the business cycle. And this is precisely why we carry reserves and precisely why we have worked so hard to build them. One of the reasons this is so critical for the city of El Cajon is our reliance on sales tax. Sales tax revenue, as you've heard me say on numerous occasions, I can't say it enough, represents 44% of general fund revenues. But beyond that, within the broad category of sales tax, there's several components that contribute to the total, the largest of which is transportation at almost 42% of our sales tax dollars. This is the combination of vehicle sales, auto parts sales, and service stations. However, vehicle sales contribute to 72% of that total, and really underlies how critical the automotive markets are here in El Cajon. Looking at the same information in a slightly different way is total sales tax and the individual categories over time. This is quarter by quarter performance of, in the case of the top line, the blue line, total sales tax. But the line directly below it is the largest category, transportation, and you can see how both of these lines drop off in the last two quarters presented here, which is quarter one and quarter two of 2020, calendar year 2020. Additionally, you can see the same impact in the green line, which is retail. The remaining categories, food, construction, and business to business, are far more stable, but they also contribute far less to the total. This leads us to FY20 results. We ended the fiscal year with revenues totaling $78 million. This is 1% over budget and at 0.2, that's 0.2% decrease from the previous year. Expenditures, on the other hand, totaled $77.8 million, which is approximately $1.1 million under budget and a 0.6% decrease from FY19. Taken together, that is a net increase to general fund balance of approximately $230,000. This is significantly better than what we were anticipating at the time we adopted the FY21 budget. At that time, we were anticipating a drawdown of excess revenues or use of reserves of approximately $3.3 million. Several things have contributed to that improved performance, the first of which is a rather unusual anomaly related to an accounting entry for unrealized gains and losses. This is an accounting adjustment we're required to do at fiscal year end to mark our investments to current market value. And what this has done is basically compelled us to book $1.3 million of revenue that really doesn't represent true revenue. Once that's taken into account, our results are more like $2 to $3 million better than we mentioned or discussed in May and June. Part of this is Prop J revenues came in over budget by approximately $800,000. Additionally, investment revenue itself was up by a very similar amount, and then expenditures were about $500,000 less than we anticipated. All in all, we were very happy with everything else that has gone on to end the year in such a condition. Changing gears to discuss the outlook for fiscal year 21. Here again, the standing caveat is it's still early in the year, and you want to make sure you take this with a grain of salt. This is an attempt to share information, but this information is to be used very cautiously. Many of the indicators we're basing these conclusions on are preliminary or unconfirmed assumptions, similar to what we used to build the FY21 budget. However, the encouraging news is sales tax projections on this most recent update suggested an additional $1.4 million of sales tax revenue better than we anticipated last. On the expenditure side, there were a couple things that came to our attention that we decided warranted a little closer attention as the year unravels, but maybe unravels isn't the best word, as we move through the fiscal year. But because it is so early in the year, we've concluded that we don't feel that action is appropriate at this time. We will continue to monitor it and update you at the mid-year report here in a few months when information's a little bit better and we have a little more confidence in what we're seeing. The big takeaway from that, and why I wanted to share this information, is that it appears that the impacts from the pandemic have stabilized a bit. In April and May, when we were discussing this, there was a distinct sense that the bottom was falling out and things were getting worse, and every day it felt like the news was worse and worse and worse. Whereas it feels like now very much that we've kind of leveled off and this is kind of the new normal. We have nothing to suggest that there will be continuing worsening of conditions. The housekeeping part of the report is related to our fiscal year 21 recommended budget adjustments, the biggest component of which is $4.2 million of carryover funding. This is a routine action we take at the first quarter of every fiscal year, and it's the way of continuing previously approved items into the new fiscal year. The preponderance of this balance is CDBG and home projects that are being carried over into the new year, but there are also a number of smaller items that just simply didn't follow the timeline that was originally anticipated in the budget and need to be continued. As I said, this is a continuation of previously approved items. The second component of which does represent new spending, and we're requesting an increase in appropriations totaling $2.5 million. That's made up of 5 adjustments, the first 2 of which are capital improvement projects that coincidentally involved public utilities that were conducting similar projects in the area. Rather than tearing up streets twice, our Public Works Department have coordinated with these utilities, torn up the streets once. We've included the repair work in our project, and the utilities simply are reimbursing us for that work. The Magnolia Performing Arts Center got off to a nice strong start at the end of fiscal year 19, and then COVID happened and hit the pause button on the Magnolia Performing Arts Center. However, the facility still needs care and upkeep for the next few months for the remainder of the fiscal year, and we're anticipating needing an additional $445,000 for this purpose. The police department is requesting additional funding of $14,800 funded by UASI grants related to a project related to information sharing equipment. And then the biggest component of which is the appropriation increase of approximately $2 million for the initial deposit in the PARS Trust Fund. Just to refresh everyone's memory and to inform the public, back in February, we were discussing pensions strategy, and one of the directions of the City Council authorized us to establish a PARS Trust Fund. What this allowed us to do is to take the $8 million or any sum of general fund money out of the general fund and move it into a separate trust fund. This does not change what this funding has been designated for. What it allows us to do is seek better investment returns than what we would experience in the city cash pool. While we want to, in the current environment, we want to be cautious and not necessarily jump in with that full $8 million amount, we're recommending an initial deposit of $2 million at this time. On the subject of pensions and CalPERS and our pension liability, since our adoption of the fiscal year 21 budget, CalPERS has released the 6/30/2019 valuation report. And as happens every year, the unfunded liability has moved a little bit. Not any significant changes, but it has increased to $207.1 million. That leaves us with a funded ratio of approximately 64%. On the bright side, in May, when we were discussing the subject, we were dealing with some very grim news related to CalPERS returns. At that time, we were receiving recommendations from the League of California Cities and from CalPERS to use a projection of 0% or negative 5% investment returns in our modeling. However, they did finish the fiscal year rather strongly and managed to bring the investment returns up to approximately 4.7% by year end. While this is still less than the 7% we need to hit our expectation with CalPERS, 4.7 is quite a bit better than negative 5. It does, however, bring a price tag with it, and we will see an impact eventually of an increase in our unfunded accrued liability as well as contributions going forward. On the subject of pensions, we're likely to be discussing this quite a bit in the next few council meetings. We're anticipating bringing a draft pension funding policy before you on October 27th for discussion of strategy and policy. Following that, we anticipate moving forward with the consideration, discussion, and approval of pension obligation bonds on November 10th. That is where, if everything goes as planned, we'll be seeking approval for issuing POBs. However, we're likely to get everything prepared and, as a result of the previous two conversations, decide what is the best timing, and we will at that time decide what is the best situation to issue POBs. So with all that being said, that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thanks very much, Clay. Council, any questions for Clay or
a question?
Bob?
Yes, I had noticed that a lot of the stores in Parkway and around the city are vacant because businesses have gone out of business. Don't you think this will be a drag on our sales tax when the government stops boosting up the businesses and giving them extra money just to carry them over time?
Well, I think regardless of what intervention the federal government has on the subject, under any circumstances, I suspect we'll see an impact to retail performance. On the chart that I brought up while you were asking your question, the green line represents general retail and its contribution, and you can see the significant fall off since the end of 2019 as a result of this event. And I would expect that to be continue to be suppressed for some time.
But don't you think in the transportation picture that car sales aren't going to jump up significantly because some people are out of work and they won't be going back to work, and they probably will be looking at their expenses, which driving is one of them. That's gas stations, sales tax on gas, and things like that. Don't you think that's going to have a continuing impact?
Mr. McClellan, I'll answer that. I think you're right. We're going to see a continued impact, and that's why Mr. Shane's graph didn't show this immediate return to sales tax performance. It will take several years to get back to that. One of the things that I'm hopeful for is we have a new Hyundai dealership coming in, the Mazda dealerships being built. So I think some of these additions will help offset the overall lack of car sales from our existing dealerships. So that may be a bit of our saving grace in the short term. But then in the long term, hopefully we'll get back to where we had been projecting before, is this green line that you see in front of you returns back to more of that blue line.
Yeah, that's a projection. And
that's a projection.
Don't always work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Okay. Got some. Can we go back to the sales tax table? I think it's one slide before that.
Oop.
So I think an earlier version of this, perhaps in May, the numbers in the change column you're saying were a spread of $7 million, and with the updated information, it's actually not as bad. It's $4.5 million. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Can I also remember correctly that you thought we were going to draw down $3.3 million from reserves, but it really may only be 1.1 million?
That is,
That's under the fiscal year.
that's kind of touchy because of that accounting adjustment that I described. We either, if you choose to look at it as that being a revenue, then we actually have an increase of fund balance and we don't use reserves at all. If you exclude that from your perspective, it is a use of reserves of approximately 1.1 million, which of course is about 2 million better than we anticipated.
2 million better than we anticipated. That's what I was looking for. Okay. In the mid-year report, I'd like to see the reserve fund balance. It's our savings account. You know, it's $47 million and we've set aside $8 million for, we don't really know where our savings account balance is as we're looking at all these numbers. So in the mid-year report, let's look at the reserve fund balance, you know, what you projected, what we actually used, because everybody wants to know, what do I have in savings during this time? So that'll be good for the mid-year report. On this particular chart, $4.5 million difference, this does not include the tax revenue from the new car dealerships, correct?
Yes, it does not include tax revenue for any new businesses. That is based on our current lineup, if you will.
So it could, $4.5 million could be better if those new car dealerships perform well.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. The Magnolia, let's go to the last slide, or it might be near the last slide that you're talking about, the housekeeping items. I get there. I get the 4.2 million, that's just the carryover. Now let's talk about the 2.5 million. The 2 million really isn't an expense. It's just a shifting of this savings account to this savings account, correct?
That is correct. It's the administrative steps we need to follow to effectively move money from one pocket and put it in the other.
It's like creating a new checking account. Your total available cash is still the same. You've just created a second account. So we haven't really spent that money yet.
That's absolutely correct, sir.
Okay. Let's talk about the Magnolia. One question for the city manager, and then I'll get back to you, Clay, on the spending question. For the city manager, we put $8 million into that thing. I think the public wants to know, hey, are you taking care of that place while we're shut down? Are you running the AC to make sure it works? Are you flushing the toilets to make sure nothing dries out? What can you tell us about how we're protecting that $8 million investment?
That's a really good question. Yeah, we are have a regular schedule to do that to make sure that the building is operational. In fact, we just the gentleman that was the general manager of the facility, his last day with Live Nation is, I think, today, and we've met the new part-time general manager who is also the general manager of the North Park Observatory. So since the North Park Observatory is having some construction right now, she's actually going to set up her office at the Magnolia, so she will be there on a regular basis. That building will continue to be used. So we are exercising the mechanical portions of the building and making sure it's functional.
Okay. We don't want non-usage to result in deferred maintenance costs.
That's correct.
Okay. Now the $445,000 that you're saying, hey, this is going to be subsidy isn't the right word. Operating loss. We thought it was going to be actually higher than that for year one when we started this whole Magnolia discussion, didn't we?
Well, so what we actually assumed for the first year that our operating costs, so our net operating costs, or you could say loss, would be about $1 million. And then as we started performing, having shows and performances were coming about, we thought that would actually drop to about $600,000, which is pretty good for the first year. We're back up to about $1 million last year. That's about how much it will have cost us to operate the facility. As we were preparing the budget in the spring, we had some assumptions that we would be starting shows. We knew we wouldn't do any summer shows, but we assumed that we would start doing shows in the fall. That's clearly not going to happen. Probably won't be happening into through the winter. We do have some shows currently slated for early spring and March. Whether that happens or not, we don't know. But out of an abundance of caution, throwing another $445,000 at the budget made prudent sense.
So let's go back to the 445. Is that, did you think that number was going to be 600,000, but it's only 445? Is that what you're saying?
We thought it was going to be 508,000. So
Okay.
if you take the 508 plus the 445, we're getting close to $1 million again. So we're about $963,000.
Okay. So even with COVID, we haven't blown past or exceeded our subsidies for the first year.
Correct. We're about on target even with COVID.
That's kind of a win, because we had planned for $1 million before COVID, and the fact that we're even having COVID and shut down, that we're slightly under $1 million in a way is a win. Would you agree?
You could say that. You should know that staff, we stress about it all the time. We would like to have shows there and to draw revenue, but you're exactly right. We went into this, when I say we, the community, the city council staff went into this knowing that it would not turn a profit for at least 3 to 4 years. And so, and we knew there would be a heavy subsidy, especially in year one. The fact that we're about what we had projected without COVID, you throw COVID in there, it's pretty miraculous.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Graham, this is Bill. Now that COVID has happened, do we add another year onto that 3 to 4 year loss projection?
We haven't talked to, in terms of how we budget for it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think once the entertainment industry opens up again, I think it's going to open up pretty robustly. In fact, I'll share this with you. We met with Live Nation earlier today, and we're looking at doing an event, a streaming event at the facility, just to stay relevant, just to stay in the marketplace. Hopefully it will be one that will break even or turn a little bit of a profit. But Live Nation is looking at maybe some other even non-traditional entertainment ideas that would be outside. Again, not to balance the Magnolia budget, but to stay relevant. So once the industry opens back up again, we never left. You know, it's like Mr. Goebel said, we're not trying to turn the water and the HVAC system on for the first time. We've been going. So I think once we are up and running, we'll be running quickly. If you look at the list of entertainers that are looking to do live streaming, it's pretty miraculous, and their prices are coming down. There's a real pent-up demand for the performers to be out performing, and there's a pent-up demand for entertainment. In fact, you can even see around our county, the Del Mar Fair has got things going on. Petco has things going on. People want to be out. They want to be entertained. They want to get back to some normalcy. I think once health orders allow us to do that, and we do open back up, I think there'll be a market for us.
Yeah, and it may be changed a little bit with the World Health Organization now saying that shutdowns is not the way to go. So it's interesting to see how things are going to change. All right, and more questions from the council? Looks like we're good. You did a good job. Thanks, guys. Let's move on to what's next then. Angela, did we receive any comments for this item?
Sir, we have no comments for this item.
All right, we don't need to close the public hearing. If there's not any further discussion, would somebody like to proceed with a motion?
Move to accept the report and take the recommendations of the staff.
Is that enough for you, Morgan?
Yeah, I think by adding to approve the recommendation, that we'll apply the motion to the appropriations and the other actions that are necessary.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we moved and seconded.
Mayor Welzer, vote please.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel,
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick,
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Thanks, Angela. All right, the second and last administrative report, item 13, is regarding the CARES Act CDC fund. I'll ask the staff to tell us about this, please.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. You can see my screen, I hope, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we recently found out that through the CARES Act, and I'll go back to a little bit more explaining what this is about, but the city's going to receive a second round of community development block grant funding through the COVID or through the CARES Act. And so we thought that we would take this opportunity to share a little bit, kind of a report card of what we have done so far, and then to give some recommendations of how we would recommend that the council consider using the next round of money. So just as a review, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, was adopted or signed by the president on March 27th earlier this year. This large act had a lot of different tentacles and funding sources, some of which have come into the city through the form of community development block grants. Some of it's come into us through the county. Some of it's come to us through the state of California. And each of these different pots of monies have different strings attached to them, different requirements, different things that they're intended to be used for. So we wanted to kind of go through all the things that we've spent CARES Act money on since this March 27th date, and then kind of focus a little bit more on the CDBG side, or the community development block grant side. And by the way, this pot of money, the CDBG money, has the most restrictions of all the money that we've received. So these are things that are pretty limited in how they can be used, but also are targeting the most vulnerable members of our community. So just kind of as a glance, the city has allocated about almost $600,000 to help eligible residents with rental assistance and utility assistance. We've spent about half of that, and we've served about 60 households in that. And we're going to come back and talk more about that program and some things that we would recommend in order to get the additional money out onto the street. We've also worked with 6 community partners, mostly nonprofits and churches, to allocate about $100,000 worth of food assistance to our community. We don't have the number of households that helped, but that money was used pretty quickly and made a big difference early on as people were out of employment or reduced employment, and before the unemployment checks started rolling in. We also have allocated funds to homeless programs. About $230,000 have been allocated to homeless programs, primarily 2. One is a contract with ECTLC for shelter space, and the other is through Home Start for motel vouchers. So they administered about $45,000 worth of hotel vouchers, and we'll go back and talk about those 2 programs in just a minute. And then we also administered a business grant program. Through the program, we were able to allocate $2.5 million to businesses that were shut down or were impacted by COVID-19, and we were able to help out 135 businesses with grants ranging from $10,000 to $25,000. So a lot of money, federal money, out on the streets, and we're proud that we've been able to allocate and distribute the majority of it as fast as possible. So I wanted to kind of come back and talk about the first round of community development block grant funds that we received. We worked with 3 agencies, Interfaith Shelter, Home Start, and CSA of San Diego County, to operate a rental and utility assistance program. And as you can see, we allocated almost $200,000 to 2 of the organizations and $172 to Home Start. And through that program, they've been able to reach out to the community, find individuals that they have to be deemed low income per HUD guidelines, and they have to show proof that they've been impacted financially through a loss of employment because of COVID-19. So that's a pretty arduous process to get through that kind of paperwork. And so We've talked to them. I'll just be honest, I'm a little disappointed we don't have more money out on the street from these pots of money, but we've had a really good meeting with them the other day. We talked about what the barriers are, some of the reporting barriers that they're having to go through, and we talked about some ways to unburden them from those, and we talked about a sort of a streamlined application online system that would be universal that we could help them develop, or we would develop and let them use that. But we also talked about there's a real need for people that own homes, people that are in home ownership who have also been impacted by reduced employment because of COVID-19. So we would recommend, and I'll come back to this a little bit later in my final slide, but we'd recommend that we actually open up the rent and utility assistance program to people that own homes and refer to it as the housing and utility assistance program, and allow people to have mortgage costs helped if there's a need there. We talked about the motel voucher program that Homestart administered. Again, we were able to help 86 households through that program, and we were able to get all that money out on the street pretty quickly. And then the remainder lies with ECTLC for an emergency shelter program. I'm not as worried about the balance of the unallocated money or unspent money out of this. We can't force people into shelters. It's nice to know that there are beds available at ECTLC that are non-religious based programming that we can help people get into shelter, especially as we enter into the winter months. So this will help augment our other shelters spaces that we have that's paid through CDBG. So this is a good place for us to be in, especially as, again, as I said, as we head into the winter months. As we talk about the second round, and I'll be honest, I don't know why it's called CV3, but I don't know what happened to CV2. We never got that. But CDBG CV3, our second round of funding, is a little over $1 million of funding. We right now would recommend that we don't take any big actions on this money, frankly, until we are able to spend down that balance of the $433,000. So we think it's important that we get to that point before we allocate the money. I think it's important that we can see where the needs really are once that money is allocated. But we clearly know that the motel voucher program was super successful, and we would recommend that we allocate another $50,000 to that program. We would recommend that we split that money, and I don't know the exact amount, and I'd hope staff would have some discretion to figure that out from the council, but we would give some to Homestart because they've been productive in getting those monies out. But we would actually give some of the vouchers to our police officers. So as they're out on the street, as they're contacting the homeless community, we can actually help people right on the street as we're dealing with other issues that our police officers deal with, that we can allocate some money towards them for that program. We would also recommend that once an agency finishes its allocation of the housing utility assistance money, that we allocated another $100,000. We think, given the sewer notices that went out recently, we think that if we expand to the mortgage program, we think that program will expend those monies pretty quickly, and we think putting another $100,000 into that program will be useful for our community. And then we would recommend that we sit on the $850,000 just for a month or two until we can figure out what the real community needs are as we continue to expend the first round of money, and staff will do some public outreach and do some surveying to understand what the other needs are, and then we would come back to the city council probably in December or January with some recommendations of how to allocate the remaining $850,000. In the meantime, we don't think we will have expended the first round by that time. So the goal would be we would be bringing forward a recommendation of how to spend the remaining $850,000 as the existing money and what we're recommending to be allocated is expended. So there would really be no drop in the ball of getting money out to those that need the help the most. So let me conclude with this recommendation. First of all, we recommend expanding the rental program to include mortgage assistance. We also, in talking with the service providers, we were pretty conservative I'll even say stingy when it came to what we allotted for an administrative fee for these service agencies of 10%. They are struggling to get through this with the staffing level that pays for. We've talked to some other cities who have actually paid for an entire staff person to help vet applications. We think that's probably too much money. We think increasing from 10% to 15% will help these organizations get the staffing that they need to get the applications vetted and the money out on the street. So we would make those two recommendations related to the current CDBG money that we have. The second round, what we would recommend again is $50,000 more for a motel voucher program, allow staff some discretion to split how we would divide that amongst Home Start and our own police officers. And then we would allocate another $100,000 for the utility assistance program. So that's staff's recommendations. We're here to answer any questions that you may have, and then would like to get some feedback from the council on these recommendations.
Well, thanks, Graham. Good report. Council, do you have any discussion?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
That one of that first charts that showed the breakdown of where the money went, that one, it was 172,000, and you helped 26 families. That's $6,600 per household. That's a pretty good chunk.
That is a lot.
What do they live in, high income houses or
remember, this is over. If someone is eligible, this could help them over a period of time, over several months. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not just 1 month's worth of rent.
Okay, so it might be 6 months worth of rent.
Yeah, and you also have to reduce that $50,000 that they haven't spent yet too. So that does reduce that a little bit.
That would cut it back.
Yeah, it's about $4,700 per family.
Okay. Yeah.
Good. Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a comment. I really like the idea of mortgage assistance because, half the people in the city own their homes and, they can lose their jobs too and then eventually lose their house. So I think this is really well laid out, and I would like to thank the staff for coming up with this.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the recommendations that Graham has laid out are good.
I've got a couple questions.
Go ahead, Steve.
For those getting rental assistance, or perhaps as we expand into mortgage assistance, when we issue these funds, who do they get paid to?
So yeah, that's a really good question. The checks do not go to the resident. They actually go to the individual they owe. So if they owe SDG&E, for example, for a utility assistance bill, the check is cut directly to SDG&E. And just so you know, also, we have not given a dime of this money to these organizations. They actually have to spend the money first, and then they get reimbursed. So, as do we as well. So, this money is not out of our pocket at this time.
On the 60 people that have been served, that does seem kind of low. Is that an issue of the application process? Is it eligibility? Is it publicity? Why do you think it was only 60?
We don't think it's publicity because we were in it. They are going through, we know they've each gone through about 100 applications already, each of those organizations. So I think there's a lot of applications. One of the challenges is that a lot of people outside of our city limits applied for this money. A lot of folks with El Cajon zip codes but don't live in the city of El Cajon. One of the things that we did early on when we realized this, we helped create a program that allows them to look up addresses quickly so they can vet them. That's one issue. One other big issue, it's very time consuming to do employment checks. So if an individual, I'll walk you through the barriers that they explained to me. So if I went in to apply for money, I'd have to show that one, I meet the income eligibility requirement. And there's some paperwork that's required for that, tax returns and other types of income statements. Then I have to show proof that I either lost my job or had hours cut back. Then the organization then has to reach out to the employer to verify that. So there is a process of sometimes 3 to 6 weeks to get all that paperwork in. We've been working with them to figure out a way to cut that time down and to speed up the applications. And they're worried about over allocating. So if they were to start the next process and get a whole bunch of people going and approved while they're waiting for verification, there's a little bit of a concern of allocating funds to folks that maybe they've run out of money for. So it is a little bit of a step by step, and we're helping them figure out a streamlined way to do that. But it is pretty time intensive. And remember, this is federal money that is coming from HUD, and HUD audits us and will audit them. And so having our ducks lined up is pretty important.
One of the items was ECTLC has not used their total allocation. Is that because they don't have enough rooms, or because people just haven't taken them up on the offer?
The latter. We haven't been taken up on the offer.
So that does imply there are people who are homeless in El Cajon who have been offered a place to stay because of this funding, and they turned it down. Is that an act?
The majority of the issues in El Cajon that having a shelter is usually not the issue. There's usually space for somebody.
Okay. Let's go to your last slide, which is your recommendations. While we're going there, the food distribution partners that I saw did a phenomenal job in maximizing the amount of food for the money that they were given. I mean, they went to warehouse stores and got deals from warehouse stores. So they executed quickly and on a very effective. We had great partners in food distribution. I think the city's staff's operation of the $2.5 million grants was phenomenal. It was done quickly, very quickly, and really helped a lot of businesses. So I think the city staff did a great job there. I'm going to recommend an increase in the motel voucher from $50,000 to $100,000, and to reduce the unallocated from $850 to $800. And here's why. There are some people who may be offered a place to stay, but they just assume in the past it's been ECTLC. And they say, oh, I don't want to go there. There's rules, even if it's been non-faith-based. This motel voucher program does offer a different option that people aren't used to. And by the way, this is the option that used all of their funds first. So it must be a popular option. So for that reason, $100,000 of motel vouchers equates to roughly 1,300 room nights. Even that can go very quickly. So I like that it's an alternative to the ECTLC program for those who may feel that ECTLC is the only option. So that's my recommendation, to increase the motel vouchers to 100 and the unallocated down to 800.
Okay.
That's all for me.
Graham, what would be the unintended consequences of that?
Staff would be supportive of that recommendation.
Good. Okay.
More comments? Oh, this is Phil. I have a couple questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. Regarding the recommendations, so we currently have, from the graph, I'm looking at the staff report, about $433,000 left in, oh no, I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. 172 plus 50 plus $97,000 in rental and utility assistance program. And the recommendation is for those existing monies that we have, to open it up to mortgage assistance. Is that what the recommendation is?
That's correct.
And then we're going to allocate another $100,000 to that existing pot. Is that right?
Correct. And I would recommend we do it to whichever organization can expend their money first.
And hats off. It looks like Home Start's working hard. It looks like overall they've helped out the most families, about 100 during this lockdown order. So it seems to me like they're getting the best bang for their buck. And then you had mentioned the barriers with regard to paperwork processing and things like that to get these families and households and people relief. That's the reason for the increase in administrative costs from 10% to 15%. Did I understand that correct?
That's correct. We would recommend that.
It's sufficient?
I think if you push any program above up to 20%, it makes me a little nervous that it's a little bit too much towards admin. I think 15% is a good first start.
It seems like, there are some organizations that are executing at that 10%, so don't want to bump it up anymore. And then are there any other organizations that, we've been talking to with other partner cities that have been all-stars that would potentially do well in El Cajon, or are these four that we're working with really the bread and butter and they know the community and their outreach is wide? Does that make sense? Are we missing out on an organization that might be doing a better job?
That's a good question. I don't know that. I mean, we haven't gone out and solicited. As you recall, we went out and solicited these folks, and so we've been happy with their performance. And as long as there continues to be performance, we would recommend we allocate more money to them. Those that don't perform, we would recommend we just end our contracts with them when the money's expended. So I think you're right. I think as there's future monies and future opportunities, if we're not happy with some of the service that we're getting, it doesn't hurt to look outside. But remember, we did look out when we did the RFQ kind of process. We looked beyond just the normal entities that we've worked with in the past. We looked out to a lot of the organizations in San Diego and even in North County. And I think a lot of them are comfortable where they're at. And frankly, we're comfortable with the organizations that we get to work with here.
That's good. Yeah, I feel as long as they're performing, it's good. I just want to make sure there's not some all-star out there that we're missing out on, but I guess we'd hear about it through osmosis and having our ear to the ground. So that's all my questions for now. Thanks. Thank you.
One other point, I see ECTLC has helped 254 households with only $150,000 or $50,000. They're doing a great job.
Yeah, ECLT knows how to make a dollar
go a long way.
Spread out. Absolutely.
Maybe they should get more so it'll last longer.
Well, let's let them get to the 113 first, and I think we will come back and address that because I think you're right.
Okay. Yeah.
Any other questions from council members?
Is there any expiration on some of these funds that we have to use them before a certain date?
That's a good question. We have from the federal government a 3-year deadline. I think it would be a travesty if we are 2.5 years out from now thinking about how we're going to get rid of the $1 million. Our goal, sometimes you want to make money last a little bit longer. I think our goal is to get the money out as fast as we can to help as many people. Frankly, from a bit of a selfish perspective, I think it'll help our economy return to some normalcy. But our goal is to get the money out. We have 1-year agreements with these entities. We've sort of set a goal of December, the end of December, to expend the majority of this first round of monies.
Graham, I don't see anything for direct food, like meals or people that are hungry.
Yeah, so we through another CDBG program, we do support that. We're not recommending, they haven't said they need additional funding for that. And to do sort of the larger food giveaways that we did earlier on with different pot of money would be really difficult to use these monies for that because there's so much we're reporting. So we would actually have to, as we gave somebody a can of tomato sauce, we'd have to get income verification. That would almost be ridiculous. So
right.
we're not recommending that.
You've thought through that. Okay. All right. Well, I think we're ready Well, first off, we should ask Angela if there's anybody who put a public comment request in.
We received no comments, sir.
All right. Great. Then I'm open for a motion. Steve, you had modified the motion.
Yeah, I'll make a
motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the staff recommendations as presented, with the exception to increase the motel voucher program under the second round from 50,000 to 100,000.
Second.
Angela?
Mayor Wells, your vote, please.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel,
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick,
Yes.
and Councilmember McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
All right, thanks, everybody. I appreciate that. There are no commissioner reports on today's agenda. Item 14 is my activities report, which is as reported. Item 15 is a legislative report, and it is as reported. Vince, would you like to make any comments on this?
No, Mayor. I was just including this as a final sum up of the session, and including the bills that did get signed by the governor, which we weren't sure of last time. So this is the remainder of the list that I provided to you earlier.
Thank you. We're at activities report of council members now. Councilmember Gary Kendrick.
As reported.
Councilmember Bob McClellan.
As reported.
Councilmember Steve Goebel.
As reported, and I have a couple comments.
Please.
Number one, a little over 2 years ago, I requested an investigation of 911 calls. And reading from the agenda report, to investigate educational opportunities and strategies to reduce unnecessary 911 calls. And really, there's kind of one business sector that accounts for about 10 to 15% of all of the fire department calls, medical calls. 10 to 15% for this one sector. And I think we can improve that. I think there's some shifting of liability to the city going on in those areas. The staff report that followed up this agenda item was done last February, and it said, well, we're not being overburdened with 911 calls, and that's good. But really, I wanted to find out how can we do something to reduce the unnecessary calls. And that could be teaching this business sector to preventive or alternative care to lower their use for 911 for alternative. So I'd like to get back to that original item. And I think staff has been doing some work in this area. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll be careful that this doesn't become an agenda item, but I'll just report out that we did do some education. We sent out some letters to these entities, and that moved the needle zero. It did no good. So our fire chief, along with our city attorney, is currently working on a plan. We have some provisions in our municipal code that we think gives us some teeth to have some enforcement or maybe some reimbursement of our costs if we find it's unnecessary. Probably needs some modifications to the municipal code. So we're working on something that will come back to the council relatively shortly, hopefully in the next few months, to address that.
So you'll probably agendize it. I don't need to right now say let's agendize that item.
Yeah, it's something that has been on staff's mind. Will be something we'll put on the agenda.
Okay. A second item that I'd like to throw out there that we should talk about as a council sometime. Recently, we approved, in the past couple of months, many self-storage units. And so I'm concerned that we're getting close to an oversaturation. And I guess this might be an agenda item I would propose, is that we take a look at, are there certain kinds of businesses where we have an oversaturation? And I guess, Morgan, is that enough to stop there? Or?
Yeah, I think what we'll do is take it through the regular process from the policy. So, you could place it on the agenda with the assistance or with the approval or another council member. But perhaps that might be the best approach, Mr. Goebel.
Okay, I will do that. Okay, and that's all I have for my items. Thank you.
Oh, great. Deputy Mayor Phil Ortiz?
As reported.
Before we go, Graham, it seems to me that it would probably be a good idea if we had some reporting in the meetings about the status of the current COVID cases and the current lockdown situations, and maybe an update on what businesses have endured through this process and what we're looking at in the future. It doesn't have to be super in depth, but it seems like a regular update would be meaningful to me. If we could ask for that in a future meeting, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I think, as you said that, I could think we could do a summary of some of the things that the county's announcing, but we'll tailor it specifically to El Cajon, and so there's an understanding of what's going on locally.
Yeah, there's a lot of information going out there, and I don't, like everybody else, I think sometimes it's hard to know which one's accurate. Okay, there are no joint council member reports today. There are no general information items on today's agenda. There are no first or second readings and no closed session on today's agenda. So that brings us to the adjournment of the regular joint meeting of the El Cajon City Council, Housing Authority, Successor Agency, to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency, held this 13th day of October 2020, which is now adjourned until Tuesday, October 27th, 2020 at 3:00 p.m. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.